All right, as we've discussed on the program, inflation rose more than predicted again in August, continuing a trend we've seen throughout President Biden's time in office. You know, the stock market responding in a very negative way, crime rising, the border in chaos. The president has been grasping for messages that he can push his base. And it's mostly resorted to criticizing American citizens who disagree with him. Joining me now to discuss this and more, Todd Starnes, author and radio host, one of the speakers at this week's Pray Vote Stand Summit here in Atlanta, Georgia. Todd, welcome to Washington Watch.
Tony, great to be here.
Sounds like I think I just talked to you, didn't I?
It seems like mere moments ago.
Yeah, I was on your program earlier today. Where can folks hear your program?
Well, they can go to toddstarnes.com. The radio show's on about 150 radio stations around America now. And of course, you can also watch it on our website. And we offer a lot of resources free of charge there at toddstarnes.com.
And I always enjoy being on the program. It's always great. And thank you for being here for the Pray Vote Stand Summit. All right, I want to get into this issue of the president. First, I want to go to something the president said on his first day in office. I want to go back to January of 2021 when he took office. Play that clip that we have of President Biden's speech.
This uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility.
So the president, on that first day saying he was going to unite America. And then today, on the Senate floor, we had the Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer saying this, clip number 5.
While MAGA Republicans are fixated on their extremist agenda, Democrats are focused on creating jobs, lowering costs, bringing our country together.
Bringing our country together? I mean, I'm not sure, Todd, where they come up with that. One more clip I want to play. This was of the president's infamous speech, his B-grade Batman set there on the steps of Independence Hall.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
So, Todd, tell me, how does that bring America together?
Well, in fairness to the president, he probably doesn't remember what he had for breakfast this morning, much less what he said on Inauguration Day. But it is not surprising. This is a man who called evangelical Christians on the campaign trail in a speech before the Human Rights Campaign about what the dregs of society. I think that was the exact phrase he used.
Building on Hillary's deplorables.
Deplorables, Barack Obama's bitter clingers, and of course now they're calling us fascist. What we've come to discover when the Democrats are out there name calling, typically it's a form of projection.
Yes.
Because they, in fact, are guilty of the charges they're levying against conservatives and especially evangelical Christians.
Yeah. Well, and we've heard a lot of the term gaslighting. Here you got Schumer talking about Democrats are focused on creating jobs, lowering costs, bringing the country together, but yet you've got MAGA Republicans, are dividing the country when in fact it is the president is dividing. In fact, Rasmussen Reports out with a survey, results of a survey today. The latest Rasmussen Reports National Telephone Online Survey finds that 48% of likely U.S. voters agree with President Biden's speech when he, said this: Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundation of our republic. 48% of likely voters agreed with him, including 36 who strongly agreed. However, 47% disagree with Joe Biden's slam on MAGA Republicans, including 39% who strongly disagree. You could not be more divided than that.
That's true, but I think there is something happening in the electorate. There's a new Harvard poll out today that shows a majority of Americans do believe that speech in front of the blood red Independence Hall actually led to more division in America. You look at the polling data coming out of Georgia right now, where Herschel Walker is actually doing better in the polls. And a lot of people that I've been speaking to in Georgia say one of the reasons why is that the brutal attacks just day after day have really had a negative impact on voters. They believe that Raphael Warnock is now bullying Herschel Walker, a man of deep and abiding faith, a man who has a great redemption story. And I think the redemption part of that story is resonating with voters, and they're really sick and tired of this nasty rhetoric. You know, Joe Biden promised that a dark winter was coming to this country. And unfortunately, Tony, we've had the dark winter and the summer and the spring and fall, and we're back getting ready for another dark winter again. And people are tired of it.
You know, Todd Starnes, my take on the president, I've talked about this on the program, get your thoughts on it. My take is that that was a voter suppression speech. By trying to lump half of America into this extremism, semi-fascist pot so that nobody wants that. I don't want to be associated with that.
Well, take it a step further. When the FBI started cracking down at the request of the Biden administration on moms and dads who were raising significant issues,
domestic terrorists.
Yeah, if you're a mom and dad, an average person not engaged in politics, you're going to be very careful about wanting to say anything that might be seen as opposition to your school board. Look at what's been happening over the past week, where we now know that 50 Trump supporters have been raided by the FBI, warrants served, cell phones being ordered to be turned over to the government. That, I believe, is a form of suppression as well. They want the conservatives, they want the Republicans to stay home on Election Day.
And so we need to do the exact opposite. We need to not only show up at the polls and vote, but we need to register 2 or 3 people and take them with us.
And let me explain what happened. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I was born and raised there, and I live there now. My home. In August, we had a major election. At issue was a district attorney who was, I guess, styled in the form of George Soros. Only 25% of registered voters bothered to show up at the polls on Election Day. And as a result, Memphis, Tennessee, now one of the most deadly cities in America, has a George Soros-style district attorney that's in office. You have a progressive city council. So elections have consequences, not just on the national level, but also on the state and local level, which is why I'm so glad that you guys are out here in the heartland, in the southern states, talking about these issues and mobilizing people to get involved.
Right. Pray, Vote, Stand. We're here this week in Atlanta, Georgia, First Baptist Church, which is the host of the Pray, Vote, Stand Summit. And we're going to be talking about the spiritual battle that is raging for our country. Yes, we need to be praying. We need to be praying like we've never prayed before. We also need to be voting because that's a part of being salt and light by engaging in the culture around us.
And one of the big challenges, and I'm not even sure I saw this one coming, where so many evangelical churches are now standing down and they're not getting engaged in the fight. They don't want to offend people. They're more concerned about really wokeness in America. I guess a form of spiritual wokeness has crept into so many churches around the country. And that is a troubling thing because, Tony, you and I both know that when churches are not engaged in the culture, bad things can happen. And I think as at least a portion of what's happening in the country right now can be blamed on the fact that so many churches have chosen to stand down.
And Todd, you're right. I agree that is the case, but I don't understand churches that are backing away. And it's not, I think it's a form of cowardice. It's a lack of moral courage to stand for what they know to be true. And of course, I bring it back to the Pray, Vote, Stand. You know, we want to pray, we want to vote, we want to educate voters. But then at the end of the day, we have to stand for biblical truth. That is our call. You know, I sign off every day here on Washington Watch with Ephesians 6. When we've done everything that we can do, that we know to do, when we pray, when we prepare, we take our stand. We're to stand. And I don't understand why we have pastors, Christian leaders that are more afraid of the cultural forces than they are of walking away from the truth of God.
Looking back going back to the 1960s, when you look at the evolution of the modern day conservative movement, William F. Buckley Jr., you had people like Ronald Reagan, and they understood that this was really a fight against communism, but the fight against communism was not a political fight, it was a spiritual fight. And here we are so many years later and fighting this threat of communism on American shores. What concerns me is the church. The church, it's going to be imperative for the church to take a stand and to fight back against the spread of communism in this country. Look, socialists, one of the first things they do when they try to take over a country is that silence the churches
Right.
and neutralize
And we see that
the
happening.
churches. And we've seen it happen, and we're watching it happen before our very eyes.
Right, very, very subtly. You often wonder, how does a country move to a form of totalitarianism that we've seen in history? You think somebody could have seen this coming, but why didn't they do anything?
I think back to the pandemic, and I was really not all that concerned so much about the virus as I was how quickly our fellow countrymen surrendered their civil liberties. It wasn't the fact that California was shutting down churches. It was a mayor in Mississippi who sent the police out to a Baptist church and started handing out citations.
For sitting in their cars.
That's what concerns me.
Yeah. So, Todd Starnes, you're going to be here at the Pray Vote Stand Summit this week speaking. You want to give us kind of a preview of what you're going to be talking about?
I'm excited about this speech. I've been working on a new book about getting back to the roots. What is it that made America great in the first place? And I'm really excited to share a little-known story about Ronald Reagan sharing his faith and evangelizing from the Oval Office. And I think it's going to be a good message, an encouraging message, I hope, as we get out there and we engage the culture.
So, Todd, as you, like me, you're on radio every day. You're also taking phone calls. You're hearing from folks across the country. What are the top three issues you think are really driving evangelicals right now and conservatives?
I think right now, especially, is this fight with the sex and gender revolutionaries, transgenderism, this direct assault on really the book of Genesis. God created male and female. I would say second is crime. That's an issue that's impacting just about every city, every community, and people are looking for answers there. They want to be able to go out and let their kids play in the park without getting shot. I think that's another big issue. And I also do think that the church at large and the attacks on the church and this whole idea of Christian nationalism, as if you should be ashamed if you wave the flag, those are issues that are really, I think, going to be compelling people to get out and vote and hopefully get engaged in the political process.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of that, when you look at the crime, you look at this indoctrination that's taking place in our classrooms, it's lawlessness. We just see the rejection of truth, where you can redefine your own gender, your own world, but you want to force other people to go along with it.
I think moms and dads in America, they want to send little Billy to school, and he doesn't come home wearing high heels and going by Sally. And as silly as that may seem, that's a reality. That is a reality right now that many parents have to face.
And I think on the issue of crime, and as a former police officer, I certainly get that, and still in contact with a lot of law enforcement. And it is getting, even some of the safest places historically in this country have become crime-ridden. I think, should be a motivation for Christians to engage, because without a moral foundation, they call it Christian nationalism. I call it American history. I mean, Christians being involved, bringing Christian principles, biblical principles to the table. That's what built this country.
We actually had a story last week in Memphis. There was a lot of horrible crime news in our town, but one story that kind of got overlooked by the media, a carjacker himself got carjacked in Memphis. That's how crazy it was. The police found stolen weapons in the back seat from somebody else.
The criminal is now become a victim. I mean, it's out of control. But again, it goes back, and this is where I think we should be emboldened as believers. We know the answer. Without a moral foundation, the nation will be lost. And so we have every right to engage in this process, to run for office, to support candidates. And, frankly, Todd, we just have to ignore the names that are being hurled, I call them verbal grenades to try to discourage us and distract us. We have to stay focused.
I heard a preacher, a very well-known preacher from New York City, and he was lecturing people in the congregation. He was preaching about anxiety. He said, "You know what? We can't be talking about politics in the pulpit. We don't need to be talking about that. We're Christians." He turned right around and he started talking about how people are freaking out because of the high crime rate in New York City. And I'm sitting there listening. I'm like, "Pastor, don't you understand the reason why there's a high crime rate right now?"
It all goes back to the policy.
Right.
Todd Starnes, great to have you on the program, and look forward to hearing you here at the Pray Vote Stand Summit.
Maybe varsity hot dogs?
Maybe so. I saw them out there.